Right now on Crossroads Politics, what a year it's been.
About it. Indiana takes the national spotlight in the fight for control in Congress. The unprecedented pressure from the White House and the bitter divide it caused among Hoosier Republicans.
Also, property tax reform.
Taxing people out of their homes, a couple $100 a month can make a big difference.
Lawmakers passed relief for homeowners, but will it work and at what cost? Plus,
big changes at the IEDC, the push to be more transparent with how Indiana spends your tax dollars to attract new business.
and power for the people. Lawmakers and electric utilities wrestle with affordability, accountability, and the future, all to keep the lights on. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR Plus as we look back at the biggest political headlines of 2025. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. Also ahead, I sat down with Governor Braun to reflect on his first year in office, the wins, the losses, and what he wants to tackle in the year ahead.
But we start with two legislative sessions, two that are sure to have an impact here in Indiana for years to come. The one that already is underway for 2026 began a couple weeks ago.
Right, and the big one earlier this year, two issues dominated the 2025 legislative session: the budget and property tax reform. Both issues took almost the entire session to pass. Governor Braun made property taxes a key part of his pitch to Hoosiers on the campaign trail. Indiana has seen some of the biggest increases in the country, not because rates went up, but because home values did.
That has hit homeowners, especially those on a fixed income, particularly hard. So Governor Braun put forward a proposal to slash property taxes across the board with massive cuts.
But property taxes fund local governments and schools. Big cuts to property taxes mean big cuts to city and school budgets, potentially reducing or eliminating some services.
Lawmakers balked at the initial bill, which would have cut billions in dollars across the state. They basically gutted the governor's bill, sending a much more gradual proposal forward.
Then the governor pushed back, saying lawmakers had not made big enough cuts. As is so often the case, lawmakers arrived at a compromise, one that didn't give either side exactly what they wanted.
And the final bill didn't cut much from property taxes this year at all and phases in more cuts in the years to come. But those cuts have cities and schools concerned, some of them worried.
This is at a time where we've seen enormous increases in cost to schools. We've seen the cost of insurance go up, both for teachers and for the buildings. We've seen increases in utility costs.
A survey of Indiana superintendents found that almost every single district in the state is considering or planning cuts to teaching and support staff to make up for the property tax cuts signed into law this year.
And the other thing lawmakers had to do was pass a balanced two-year budget for the state. And the governor wanted to do more than balance it.
Governor Braun kicked off the session by outlining that he wanted every single department in state government to find a way to cut their budget by 5%. He also wanted lawmakers to pass universal school choice vouchers. At the start of the year, very wealthy families did not get vouchers to send their kids to private or charter schools. Republican
lawmakers had long wanted to get that done, and it did wind up in the final bill.
But just as lawmakers were getting ready to pass the budget, a grim economic forecast sent them running back to the drawing board.
What had been a surplus would have turned into a shortfall as economists projected growth slowing as President Trump's tariffs went into effect. Lawmakers needed to find funding to cut or basically a new revenue stream.
In the end, they looked to smokers to make up the difference. Lawmakers hiked the tobacco tax, increasing the bill on the average pack of cigarettes by about $2.
We know by increasing the cigarette tax by $2 per pack that we're helping over 32,000 Hoosiers quit smoking, but we're also preventing people from picking up that habit.
That's projected to bring in a load of money at first, but also encourage more people, of course, to quit to avoid paying that high tax. Not the worst way to lose tax revenue, as smokers who quit end up saving in healthcare costs in the long run. And that, hiking the cigarette tax was something that the Senate had basically avoided for years.
Long time.
Despite attempts in the House to try and get that passed, but
Right.
they finally were able to do it to bring in some more money. Then this summer, the battle over redistricting began. Vice President J.D. Vance coming to Indianapolis to talk with the governor, along with House Speaker Todd Huston and Senate Pro Tem Rod Bray, about redrawing Indiana's congressional maps.
The White House wanted to pick up 2 more congressional seats by redrawing the 1st and 7th districts to force out Democratic Congressman Frank Mervan and Andre Carson. Democrats were quick to condemn the push, calling President Trump and redistricting supporters cheaters.
Large crowds came out against redistricting, with more modest crowds in favor. A lot of people wanting to make their voices heard there, as you see. Within weeks, Houston said the House had the votes to pass a new congressional map, but Bray in the Senate said the votes were not there in his chamber.
Right, and after months of wrangling with no progress from Bray and intense pressure from the president, Governor Braun called a special session to deal with redistricting. Then lawmakers decided they wouldn't do a special session, just move up the regular session to right after Organization Day.
But Bray said the votes still weren't there and said the Senate would not start the session early. A wave of violent threats followed, targeting at least a dozen Republican lawmakers and then the governor himself.
Right. At the same time, President Trump threatened to support primary challengers to senators who didn't support the redistricting bill. Governor Braun agreed.
The House announced it would meet the first week of December, the Senate the week after. The House passed the redistricting bill, though more than a dozen Republicans voted with Democrats against it.
In the Senate, as the final debate was underway, it was unclear how the vote would go.
Here in this state, we have a Republican governor. We have a Republican supermajority in the House. We have a Republican supermajority currently in this chamber. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why we make the decisions we make, because of the policies and the principles that those of us who are Republicans believe in.
If you would have told me that a Republican supermajority would leave 2 seats on the table, I wouldn't have believed you. I think this is an opportunity to right that wrong.
Some say Indiana doesn't know what time it is, but I think we know exactly what time it is. It's time for patriots to stand by the Constitution and say, we, the people of the United States, are the only ones who should ever decide an election. It's time to say no to pressure from Washington, D.C. It's time to say no to removing accountability from elected officials. It's time to say no to outsiders who are trying to run our state.
During hours of passionate debate, lawmakers discussed the impacts of the bill, with Senator Greg Good condemning how dirty the political fight had gotten.
Friends, whether we realize it or not, whether we accept it or not, the forces that define this vitriolic political affairs in places outside of Indiana have been gradually and now very blatantly infiltrated the political affairs in Indiana. Misinformation, cruel social media posts, over-the-top pressure from within this state house and outside, threats of primaries, threats of violence, acts of violence. Friends, we're better than this, are we not?
And as you can see right there, the session ended in cheers from the protesters outside, and in the end, the vote was not close.
Yeah, more Republican senators voted against the bill than for it. The final vote, 31-19.
President Trump, who pushed hard for a new map, said he loves the state, but not the vote.
It's a great place. I love the people there. They love me. You know, we won in a landslide all 3 times. Got tremendous votes. I got record votes. And then there's no reason for doing that. And the Democrats do it to us, so I can't imagine that they do it, but I wasn't very much involved.
And because the vote was part of the regular session, this issue cannot come up after the legislative session ends, which may not happen until March. So it's pretty much a done deal, not going to happen in the near future.
Right. In the meantime, threats of political punishment for Republicans who didn't support the bill seem to have died down.
They're entitled to that. It's their prerogative to have opinions about what we're doing here. So that's fair. I've had conversations with them. They've explained why it's so important, and as I've indicated before, I agree how important that is. But the process or the goal is the same, but the method is perhaps a little different. But yeah, I understand that's their prerogative to do.
Are you concerned about loss of funding?
I've had lots of conversations with folks in Washington, D.C. Indiana will continue to function and do well.
I don't think that can be resurrected in this session, but I think it plays out in a broader way. But again, if you try to generalize on it, I think it's a mistake, because it's a national issue that put us out of sync with all other states, the administration, large majority of Republicans and conservatives in this state. I think you let it rest there, and then you focus on the things we have under our control.
This was a debate that had the eyes of the nation on Indiana. The line just to cover the Senate hearing as a member of the media was huge. So much interest in this, a lot of passionate debate on both sides of that in the Senate. I mean, in the end, the votes were not there, and that is something that Rod Bray said all along.
The whole issue, the whole story was just fascinating, because not only did it create this rift among the Republican Party in Indiana, but I remember our conversation with Capitol Chronicle editor Nikki Kelly a couple of weeks ago, who's covered the State House for years, and she said she does not remember a more bitter, divisive issue than this.
And if you ask the governor about that, though, and Republican lawmakers, they say no, that's kind of fabricated by the media. But there were strong words on both sides of this debate. So it's hard not to think that some of that could be carried forward anyway.
Yeah. Well, we will remember it for a very long time.
A very long time. This was Governor Braun's first year in office. I sat down with him for an extended interview looking back at what he accomplished and what he hopes to accomplish in the future. But first,
We need to make sure that we keep rates under control.
The politics of power, how electricity bills shaped the political debate this year here in Indiana. It's next on Crossroads Politics. Our electric bills were a hot topic this year here in Indiana. Costs spiked sharply in 2025, with average residential bills going up about 17% statewide compared to last year. That's an average of $28 more a month.
Yeah, that's the largest year-over-year jump in at least 2 decades. Consumer advocacy groups criticized the increase and urged state leaders to do more about it.
Nobody's saying we want financially unhealthy utilities. Nobody's saying we don't want economic growth, economic development. What we do want is everyday Hoosiers being able to afford the essentials of daily life and live their lives with a little bit of dignity.
Governor Braun did establish a strategic energy growth task force to develop a plan for meeting rising electricity demand while balancing affordability, reliability, and economic growth. Some lawmakers also proposed legislation this year to reduce energy costs and grow the economy through tax incentives for advanced technologies like small modular reactors. The Indiana Regulatory Commission, known as IURC for short, was a focal point of political debate. Governor Braun appointed 3 new utility commissioners, and there was also discussion over how the IURC evaluates evidence, transparency, and whether utilities are acting in the public interest.
And that was something that we heard a lot from Governor Braun. The one big thing he wanted to change with economic development in Indiana, it was more transparency and accountability for IEDC. Well, one big part of the utility debate in Indiana has been the fight over data centers.
Data centers have been around for years. They're where most of the websites and apps that use the internet are stored.
But a new generation of those data centers that cater to AI programs like ChatGPT are different. These data centers, running chips that only work for AI, use gigawatts of power. It's enough to power tens of thousands of homes. They also use a lot of water to cool those computer chips.
Many groups in Indiana and across the country have tied big increases in utility bills to the sudden growth of these AI-focused data centers. Almost all of them are being built by 2 types of companies.
One, the ones of the big tech firms like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, they're known as hyperscalers because they are building so many gigantic data centers.
The other type are so-called neoclouds, companies that build these data centers and then rent them out to the big AI companies like OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT, and Anthropic, which makes Claude.
Some of these data centers have huge footprints. One data center owned by Google and approved for Morgan County will be more than 500 acres. We're looking at the land right here, and it would use more power than all of the homes in Indianapolis.
That Morgan County data center was approved over large community protests and after the Indianapolis City County Council rejected another Google data center planned for Franklin Township.
Those against say that regular ratepayers end up footing the bill when these electric companies have to build extra power plants to power these data centers. Recent data center projects, including Amazon data centers planned for northern Indiana and that Google project in Morgan County, have included promises from the big tech companies to cover the costs of new power generation, something Governor Braun says needs to be expected.
Now that rates also have gotten in a place that most people are uncomfortable with, any data center is going to have to expect that since one could use up to 5% of our current generation, that they're going to have to be responsible for paying for it.
But that pushback has also affected the smaller normal data center projects that are popping up, even though those projects use much less power and have been operating around central Indiana for decades.
At least one bill dealing with data centers has already been introduced for the 2026 legislative session.
State Representative Alex Burton introduced House Bill 1043, which would require the Department of Environmental Management to make sure a data center project wouldn't endanger water supplies for communities around central Indiana.
This year, the governor also took aim at the state's biggest economic development agency. We just mentioned that a second ago. We're going to look deeper into the changes at the IEDC. But first,
know how we got into that predicament, but it still is a responsibility of whoever is in charge.
Governor Braun and I sit down for an extended discussion of his first year in office next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back to our look back at 2025 in politics. So 2025 was, of course, the governor's first year in office, Governor Mike Braun. Emily, you got more time than usual recently to sit down and kind of look back at that first year. What do you think was your biggest takeaway?
Well, the governor is really proud of the restructuring and streamlining that he did in this first year of state government under his watch. His work on property tax also, he really touted that. And of course, we asked him about redistricting, a topic he addressed, but also seemed ready to move on from and look ahead to the future of what he wants to accomplish in this next legislative session. Here's my conversation with the governor. Thanks, Governor, for this end of the year interview. You know, you were sworn in just under a year ago with the goal of delivering freedom and opportunity to Hoosiers. Looking back on your first year in office, how would you summarize your biggest successes and the biggest lessons learned so far?
So I think when you're coming from where I was, the U.S. Senate, we took a great Hoosier team out there, and most of them came back and distinguished ourselves there as a freshman Senate office. And I get the question often, why didn't you do another 6 years? Well, if I'd wanted to run for governor, it would have been 2032. And there, you got to get 60 senators to agree to something that's going to be transformational. So we got good at picking practical ways to get stuff done. Here, state government gets a lot more down to the basics. You've got a legislature that's going to be heavily tilted in the direction of where I think freedom and opportunity and running government more efficiently would make sense. And then you find that a lot of the things you deal with are kind of thrown into your lap of having to get through. And property taxes, obviously, campaigning, and ate up a lot of the energy in the room. And we got through it. I mean, when you look at 2/3 of Hoosiers are going to be paying less on their property taxes. It flattened out the trajectory. And when it exempts all homes by 31 to the tune of 2/3, that's an accomplishment. That's different. So you run into things that you've got to deal with. Now it's probably affordability, high utility rates, which I think we're already showing that we mean business on it. But I look at statistics. When you look at Indiana, with what we've been able to do in a short period of time, economic development is going to be an important thing that we've got to get right. And I want to do that in a broader way that emphasizes entrepreneurs, Main Street, critical businesses that we need to bring here, and do it in a way that is affordable. So when you look at GDP growth, ours is double that of Illinois, Ohio, triple that of Kentucky, and it's 6 times better than Michigan. Those are real results that I think come from taking a different point of view and just getting it done in the 11 months we've had to work with. So a lot of other issues we'll get to, but that's an example of how I think in a short period of time, we've done a lot.
Speaking of, you said things come up. What was the toughest decision you made this year, and would you do anything differently?
So when it comes to, I think, it was a surprise when you get Senate Bill 1 as property tax reform, and then they proceeded to completely gut it, and it had to be rebuilt in the House of Representatives. That's part of the way things work. I think that was something that probably then took us kind of away from doing more to reform healthcare, where in Indiana we got some of the highest costs in the country with some of the poorest outcomes. We were hit with a budget forecast that showed we were going to have $1 billion shortfall this year and next year. Well, thank goodness that was a forecast that I think was built on a faulty premise. We're already cash flowing much better than that. So there, I think, in what you do differently, it's in stuff that you maybe didn't have on your agenda that you got to get through. And I think, though, when you look at the totality of it, I'm proud of the team we put together, not to mention we had a sprawling state government that many other governors wanted to reorganize, and we did that into a system where we've got entrepreneurial secretaries that are now running 8 policy silos. That was talked about by many, and when we got here, there was very little ability to get great ideas up through the system from our own state employees, from the constituents we deal with. That'll probably be the most significant thing that we were able to do. And of course, we could do that all just by restructuring state government that had gotten sprawling and maybe a little fat and happy that we're now getting back into where we're actually getting more done, spending less doing it.
You brought up property taxes. And gutting the original, right, in the House. How do you respond to concerns about...
In the Senate.
In the Senate,
the House,
sorry.
we built it back
That's right.
to where we got reasonable property tax reform done.
So how do you respond to concerns about lost revenue for local services? And we heard that, the potential for new or higher local income taxes as a result.
I think that, when it comes to, and I've been very clear, the health of our local governments and public school districts have to be, always kept in mind when you go through a time like COVID where there was a lot of other stuff going on. How we navigated through it, I think most would think that we borrowed and spent way too much. You got to remember, $8.7 billion was given to Indiana, half split between the state, half between local governments and school districts. Probably got used to revenues that obviously weren't going to be there once you get through it. And that also delivered us massive inflation, 22, 23, and 24. Roughly around 25%. You average that over the 3 years, it's about 8% a year. We had not seen anything like that since the 80s. So it's amazing to me that so quickly we've been able to get back to close to normal. And of course, that's where the administration, I think, takes undue heat. I mean, it's almost back to normal. And the other side of the aisle, believes maybe in doubling down on more government in some of those policies. So I think that is, when you look at just 1 year, we've navigated through all of that and got a lot of things to show that I think put us in a much more solid place. And we'd kind of gotten off course, not necessarily due to things that the prior administration did, but the things it had to deal with. COVID and then, inflation that got completely out of control. And now affordability is the big issue. And for the other side to say that they're the party of that, I think you better be careful. Most people would know how we got into that predicament, but it still is a responsibility of whoever is in charge. That's why that focus on repopulating the IURC, taking the office of consumer counselor and putting someone there that when the first rate increase was requested, she recommended a 10% or so reduction. And we're going to stay steady on holding entities accountable that need to be held accountable when it comes to kitchen table issues of basic cost of living.
Another issue that we recently navigated through as a state, redistricting.
Yep.
Want to ask you a couple questions. Explain why you believe that was necessary outside of the regular census cycle.
So I think here we're talking about something that the loudest voice against it would have been Democrats and moderates and liberals. We think by the time the vote occurred, a large majority of Republicans and conservatives were for it. When you do have issues like that descend from afar, I think it gives you a stark kind of picture of how half of the Senate was out of sync with most Hoosier Republicans, what was happening in other states, requests from the administration, and you get through it. To generalize on it when it doesn't have much to do with how you run state government, you can do that. And the people that are probably never for you when it comes to being entrepreneurial and running government more efficiently would do that. And I think it reflects an uneven playing field that the other side of the aisle has mastered over the years by doing it so effectively. What kind of impact that's going to have when generally you got to be careful. The party not in power always has a challenge, with midterm elections. I think it'll boil down to, though, if you're trying to win on the issue of affordability, I think you'll really lack credibility. Because here, when you're endorsing as state legislators the policies of your national cohorts, that's what gave us inflation. That's what grew government. That's what didn't take care of issues like open borders and its complications, or growing an economy based upon real growth, not a sugar high borrowing and spending.
Let me ask you, in previous scrums, when you were asked what happens if the Senate would vote it down, you said the conversation is not over. Is this the end? Would you call a special session, or is it time to let the current map stand?
No, I think there, when the mechanics of trying to resurrect a bill, the consequences are what you do in response to half of the Senate, being of different opinions there. I mean, it passed with a wide majority in the House. That'll flesh itself out. I don't think that can be resurrected in this session, but I think it plays out in a broader way. But again, if you try to generalize on it, I think it's a mistake, because it's a national issue that put us out of sync with all other states, the administration, a large majority of Republicans and conservatives in this state. I think you let it rest there, and then you focus on the things we have under our control. Will the Senate, will the legislature be interested in reforming a broken healthcare system and other issues that are really important to Hoosiers? I'm going to be able to, I think, weigh in and make sure that the current issue of the affordability of electricity is held in check, in addition to making sure that we have enough generation and can take advantage of some of the things that the demand for more generation is asking for. So
some lawmakers had expressed to me during the process last week that they were told from Washington that if they didn't vote for it, some federal funding could be at question for. Are
that
you
all
concerned?
remains to be seen. I think that it probably doesn't endear you, but I think I've got a strong enough relationship there on the critical stuff. I think the big question would be for the senators that decided to distinguish themselves from the bulk of most Hoosier Republicans, including our congressional delegation, which was 100% for it. That would be where I'd be doing the soul searching. To me, when it comes to all the nuts and bolts of running state government, you look at those issues, you don't generalize upon this.
Do you see this as a schism in the party?
No, I don't. I think the media and folks that maybe aren't interested in the fact that, think about our own state, where I'm from. The reason there was balance historically between both sides of the aisle, where it did ebb and flow, is 2 congressional districts completely changed complexion over the last 15 to 20 years, the 8th and the 9th. They were blue dog Democrats that are now socially and fiscally more conservative than any of the legacy Republican areas. The reason that you've got 10 Democrats in the Senate and only 30 in the House is because Southern Indiana has changed to where it's now a bastion of conservatism and wanting less government that's more effective. Those are the big picture items that I think you need to look at. So to me, it still spells lots of opportunity on the issues of education, which is K through 12 is 50% of our budget. Post-secondary, another 15%. The fact that we were able to, on our own, ask our public universities to do what Purdue has done for 13 years. Freeze tuition, room and board, other stuff. And those are big accomplishments that when it comes down to what Hoosiers are looking for, they're going to look at that. They're not going to generalize upon, where I think many will want to stay focused. I think that's a mistake.
Let me ask you about data centers, because that's come up for Hoosiers. Large protests from some communities that are worried about the massive tax breaks that data centers get, the massive amounts of power and water they use, and maybe a limited local benefit. Is this an issue that lawmakers should look at, and how can the state help communities navigate this issue?
I think it's a bona fide issue. I think when it comes to data centers, obviously they're not going to work around areas that have lots of population. One just failed on the east side of Indy. Another one faltered up north. But I think they're going to be half of our 70 to 75 rural counties that would look at it as a blessing. And some have already come here. So I think data centers will go in places where it'll have an immediate impact on lowering property taxes, places where they wouldn't have the infrastructure to support a large company coming in with a lot of jobs due to the educational and healthcare infrastructure. And so I think they will have a place. But the people that are wanting them, hyperscalers, are going to have to make sure they pay for it and then put electrons back onto the grid. And that would be a perfect win-win for a lot of our rural counties that are looking for what their next act is going to be. And we've got a lot of them that are flat or losing population to where it'd be a good match. It's not going to work probably in a place where you got a lot of population.
Last question, as you move into your second year, what are your top priorities for Hoosiers?
So it'll be the things that are, I think, most important to Hoosiers. How do we get better value out of our state government that became sprawling over time? How do we reform healthcare, both through insurance companies and hospitals that currently deliver us a very expensive product based upon expensive remediation, doesn't focus on things like wellness and prevention, doesn't engage the employee, the Hoosier as a healthcare consumer. I'm going to be on initiatives that try to make Indiana healthier, and that, when you see how that relates to even our involvement in Medicaid, is a part that is really going to need to be managed well, or else it'll stress the budget. We're already being touted as a state to look at, and some of that occurred from momentum in the prior administration. Katie Jenner is a dynamo at leading the cabinet post in education. So we're going to build upon the things that are most important to Hoosiers. A lot of the other stuff are distractions, and my experience of knowing how to do it in a place as unruly of getting stuff done in the U.S. Senate, I'll draw upon that experience. The same team is here, and you'll have to deal with the people that were never really for an entrepreneurial, conservative approach to government. That's going to win the day, and that's because most Hoosiers are in that camp, and you got to get through the distractions that come your way, get through them the best you can, focus on healthcare, education, affordability. And I'm going to know those three issues as well as anybody that's recently been in this post. And I got a great team. And despite what you saw in the wrestling match on redistricting, we'll work together to deliver results there.
Okay, Governor Mike Braun, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Still ahead, big changes at the IEDC after Governor Braun orders an independent audit. How the state's biggest economic development agency was transformed. Next, here on Crossroads Politics.
This year was also a year of big changes for the state's top economic development agency, the IEDC.
That's right. Within months of taking office, Governor Braun ordered an independent audit of that agency, and that's in part because of the unusual space the agency works in. Former Governor Mitch Daniels created the IEDC as a public-private partnership that replaced the old State Department of Commerce.
But the IEDC operates in secret, it says, to help it make deals. But that has led to questions about where money comes from and where it goes. Those concerns were heightened after the IEDC launched the massive LEAP district outside of Lebanon.
I spoke with former Governor Daniels about the issues. He was sympathetic to state officials, but warned against excess.
The terms of competition have shifted. There are states doing things I think are very irresponsible with their own taxpayers' dollars, throwing money at companies. And so I'm not quick to criticize if Indiana has occasionally done more than we would ever have done in terms of incentives and so forth. Because as you say, the environment has changed. But I think you have to always be vigilant.
After the audit, Governor Braun made some changes, replacing the IEDC board and freezing the work of the agency's venture capital arm. The audit itself flagged serious transparency concerns, but stopped short of saying anyone violated Indiana law.
And you can see my interview with Mitch Daniels and all of our past coverage on every issue we've mentioned on this episode. You can watch it all on demand here on WTHR+.
And before we go, we also wanted to highlight how involved Hoosiers got in politics this year.
When it comes to turnout, the numbers show Indiana has among the most apathetic voters in the country. Our turnout sank to the bottom in the 2022 midterms. We ranked 50th. Even in the contentious 2020 presidential election, we ranked 46th in the country. So, as we debated redistricting, property tax reform, and presidential authority, no matter what side you were on, civic groups are applauding how many of you showed up to speak out and get involved in the process. All of this really mobilized the masses to have their voice heard. And in a democracy, Emily, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Sure is, yeah. And we want to thank you for showing up as well. Without you watching and giving us feedback and tips, we wouldn't be able to make Crossroads Politics happen. I'm Emily Longnecker.
I'm Dustin Grove. Keep those messages coming. We want to hear from you. For Emily, Nikki Kelly, Bob Siegel, Alex Almanza, and everybody here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. Happy New Year. We hope to see you next time.